As you approach the bus, you want to check to make sure it's not leaning to one side or the other. This would indicate a flat tire or broken suspension. Look for any hazards around the bus, such as low-hanging limbs, wires, people or vehicle, anything that would make it unsafe to move the bus. Look at all your body panels for any dents, damage, scratches, or vandalism. Check under the bus for any fresh fluid leaks, such as oil, coolant, fuel, or grease. You want to look at all your lights, reflective lenses, and reflective tape to make sure they're clean, not cracked, loose, or missing. Check your clearance lights, red warning lights, low beam headlights, and your hazard lights to make sure they're working. As you open the hood, you want to look for any dents or damage to the hood. Check the hood straps to make sure they're not weather cracked or hanging loose. As you open the hood, you want to check your hood hinges, make sure they're not cracked or damaged, and have no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Also, check the hood cables to make sure they're not frayed or damaged and all the nuts and bolts are in place on them. Look inside your engine compartment for any excessive moisture, such as grease, oil, or fuel. Look at all of your coolant hoses, air hoses, make sure they're mounted securely. You see no leaks, bulges, or kinks to any of your hoses, and you're listening for any air leaks. Check all your wiring. Make sure there's no burnt, frayed, bare, or loose wiring under your hood. Check the oil once daily. Pull the dipstick out, clean it off, reinsert it, pull it out. Should check between the add and the full line. Check the power steering fluid once daily. Pull the dipstick out, clean it off, reinsert it, pull it out. It should check between the add and full line. Check the transmission fluid once weekly with the bus running and the engine warm. Pull it out, clean it off, reinsert it, pull it back out. Should check between the add and the full line. Check your coolant reservoir. Make sure it's bolted securely. Proper amount of coolant in the sight glass or in a plastic reservoir. It should read between the minimum and maximum. Make sure you have plenty of washer fluid for your trip, enough to clean your windshield. Check your belt. Make sure it's not ripped, frayed, has no more than 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch play in the belt. Your power steering hoses are mounted securely. There's no leaks, bulges, or kinks. Steering shaft is mounted securely. It's not worn, bent, or damaged, and the shaft couplings appear to be tight. The steering gearbox is mounted securely to the frame with no loose or missing nuts and bolts, and the housing is not cracked or leaking. Pitman arm is not worn, bent, or cracked. No loose or missing nuts and bolts on the pitman arm. Drag link is not worn, bent, or cracked. Castle nut and cotter pins are in place. The upper and lower control arm and tie rod end are not worn, bent, or cracked. All castle nuts and cotter pins are in place. Check your spring mounts, front and rear. They're not cracked or damaged, have no loose or missing nuts and bolts. The springs are in proper alignment. There's no broken, loose, or missing leaves. The U-bolts are not cracked or damaged and have no loose or missing nuts on the bottom. Check the shock mounts, top and bottom. They're not cracked or damaged. The shock is not cracked, dented, and not leaking. Air hose going into the air chamber is mounted securely. There's no leaks, bulges, or kinks. The ABS wire mounted to the air hose has no frayed, bare, or burnt wires, and it's mounted securely. Check the drums and linings for any contaminants, such as fresh oil or grease or any debris. Check the tires. Front tires should have a minimum tread depth of 4/32 on the front tires. No abrasions, bulges, or cuts to the tread or the sidewall. Check the inflation with the tire gauge. Should be aired to manufacturer's specifications. The valve stem is not bent and the cap is on tight. The rim has no cracks, bends, or welding repairs. No loose or missing lug nuts. No rust trails or shiny spots around the lug nuts or the studs to indicate they are loose. Hub oil seal is not cracked, damaged, or leaking. It's mounted securely. Splash guard is not ripped or torn and has no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Close your hood. Then we're going to check the side of the bus, check all of our lights, reflective lenses, and reflective tape to make sure it's all clean, not cracked, loose, or missing. You can see that the clearance lights, the hazard lights, and the lights on the stop sign are all working properly. Check the mirror brackets to make sure they're mounted securely. The glass is clean, not cracked, and the brackets tight holds the mirror in proper adjustment. Check the stop sign, make sure it's mounted securely, has no loose or missing nuts and bolts. The air bladder is not weather cracked or damaged, has no leaks. The wiring is mounted securely. There are no frayed, bare, or burnt wires to the stop sign. The return cable and cotter pin are in place with no damage. The battery box. Open the battery box door. Check and make sure that the tray is mounted securely. The batteries are mounted securely in the tray. There is no corrosion on the terminals, no frayed, bare, or burnt wires in the battery box. Also check for any foreign objects inside your battery box, and as you shut the door, make sure your hinge and latch are tight. Check the frame and cross members underneath the bus. The frame is not cracked, damaged, no welding repairs, no loose or missing cross members, no loose or missing nuts and bolts on the cross members. Everything's mounted securely to the frame. Check the drive shaft from the rear of the transmission to the front of the rear end. Make sure it's not worn, bent, nothing rubbing the drive shaft, no loose or missing nuts and bolts on the carrier bearings, and the U-hangers are mounted securely. Check the exhaust from the manifold to the end of the tailpipe. There's no severe dents, holes, or damage to the exhaust. No loose or missing nuts and bolts on the clamps on the exhaust, and all the hangers appear to be tight with no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Use the cross-check method for the rear end. You want to check your spring hangers, front and rear, make sure they're mounted securely, they're not cracked or damaged, have no loose or missing nuts and bolts. The springs are in proper alignment with no broken, loose, or missing leaves. The torsion spring or torque arm is mounted securely and it's not worn, bent, or cracked. The U-bolts are mounted securely with no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Check the shock, top and bottom mounts are not cracked or damaged. The shock is not dented, damaged, and not leaking any fluid. The airbag mounts, top and bottom, are mounted securely. They're not cracked or damaged. And the airbag is fully inflated. It's not weather cracked or leaking any air. Check the air hoses going into the rear air brake chambers. Make sure they're mounted securely with no leaks, bulges, or kinks. The ABS wire is mounted securely to the air chamber. There's no frayed, bare, or burnt wires on the ABS line. Check the drums and linings for contaminants such as grease or oil or any debris. Check your rear duals, the spacing in between. Make sure the wheels are bolted tightly together with no foreign objects wedged in between the dual wheels. A minimum tread depth on the rear wheels of 2/32 in every major groove. No abrasions, bulges, or cuts to the tread or the sidewalls. Check the inflation with the tire gauge. Should be aired to manufacturer specification. The valve stems are not bent and the caps are on tight. The rim has no cracks, bends, or illegal welds. There are no loose or missing lug nuts, no rust trails or shiny threads to indicate that lug nuts are loose. The axle seal is not cracked or leaking and has no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Check the rear splash guard. Make sure it's mounted securely, it's not ripped or torn, and has no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Check the lights, reflective lenses, and reflective tape on the rear of our bus. Make sure it's all clean, not cracked, loose, or missing. We can see that the clearance lights, the red warning lights, hazard lights, and the tail lights are working on the rear of the bus. Open the rear emergency door. Make sure it opens properly and the door catch works properly. Check the rubber seal around the door. Make sure it's not ripped, worn, or missing. This keeps the exhaust fumes out of the bus. Check up the bus for the floor cleanliness. Make sure there's no student belongings. As you shut the door, make sure the latch and hinge are tight. We check the right side of the bus exactly as we did the left side, with a few exceptions. First, we check our fuel tank. Open the fuel door. Check, make sure the cap is on tight. The lines going in and out of the tank. There are no leaks, bulges, or kinks. There are no dents or damage to the tank. The tank straps are tight, have no loose or missing nuts and bolts. We see no fuel leaks underneath the tank. And we check the cage around the tank, make sure it's not cracked or damaged and have no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Check the DEF tank, open the door, make sure the cap is on tight. The fuel lines going in and out of the tank, there are no leaks, bulges, or kinks. The wiring is not frayed, bare, or burnt. There's no dents or damage to the tank, and we see no leaks on the ground. Check, make sure the current State Highway Patrol safety inspection sticker is affixed to the side of the bus. Check the entrance door. Make sure the weather stripping is not frayed, dry rotted, or hanging loose. Check the glass, make sure it's clean, not cracked. Check the hinges, make sure there's no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Check the steps, make sure they're not dented or damaged. The step treads are not worn or loose as to trip a student entering or exiting the bus. Check the handrails to make sure they're mounted securely, no loose or missing nuts and bolts, and nothing to snag the students as they enter or exit the bus. Check the windshield, make sure it's clean, not cracked, no illegal stickers. Check the student mirror, make sure it's clean, not cracked, no illegal stickers, bracket is tight. Check the sun visor, make sure it's mounted securely and is clean and tight. Check the emergency equipment, have the proper size first aid kit for the bus, securely mounted, fully stocked with 3 emergency assistance cards inside and spare electrical fuses if so equipped. Proper size fire extinguishers for the bus, securely mounted, fully charged with the current inspection tag on, pin in place. Proper size body fluid cleanup kit for the bus, securely mounted and fully stocked. Red reflective triangles in proper working order, securely mounted. Check the driver's seat, make sure it's bolted securely to the floor. The cover has no cuts, tears, or vandalism. Check the driver's seat belt, make sure it's mounted securely to the floor and the wall, and there is no rips, tears, or worn spots in the seat belt. Check to make sure that it fully extends and that the seat belt latches securely and unlatches smoothly. As you sit in the driver's seat, you want to make sure to put your seat belt on, that your seat is properly adjusted. Check your mirrors, make sure they're properly adjusted for the driver. Now we're going to do a safe start. With our parking brake set, bus in neutral, turn the key on, let our gauges cycle, wait for the wait to start light to come on and go off, and the ABS light to come on and go off. Start the bus, turn on our headlight switch, make sure our dash panel illuminates. Check the oil pressure gauge and make sure it rises to normal operating pressure within 3 to 5 seconds after starting the bus. Check the temperature gauge, it will gradually rise to normal operating pressure. Check the voltmeter, make sure that the volts are in the green, showing the alternator is charging. Check the tachometer, we'll check the speedometer when we move the bus. Check the fuel gauge to make sure there's enough fuel for the trip. Check the transmission temperature, it will gradually rise as you operate the bus. Check the air gauge, make sure it's building to the government cutoff of 120 psi. Check the steering, make sure there's no more than 2 inches or 10 degrees play in the steering before the wheels move. Check your left turn signal indicator, right turn signal indicator, I-beam indicator, and hazard lights indicator. Then check, make sure the horn works. Now we're going to check the transmission, make sure it engages in every gear. Drive, 3, 2, 1. Check reverse, make sure the backup beeper sounds. I'm going to check the parking brake, put the bus in gear. With the parking brake set, lightly throttle against it, make sure the parking brake holds. Then check the service brake. With the bus in gear, release the parking brake, pull forward approximately 5 miles per hour. The bus should come to a complete stop without skidding or swerving to one side. After this step, secure your bus, set the parking brake, put it in neutral, shut it off. Now we're going to check the air brake system. We're going to perform a safe start, make sure the brake is set, bus is in neutral, foot on the service brake. Start the bus, make sure that our air gauge is working and it should be building to the governed cutoff of 120 and 140 psi. Then identify the air pressure at which your vehicle cuts out. This particular vehicle cut out at 120 psi. Now shut the bus off, turn the key back to the run position, release the parking brake. With your foot on the service brake, after the air pressure stabilizes, you should have no more than 3 psi air loss in 60 seconds. All that 60 seconds, this particular vehicle lost no more than 3 psi. Next step, we're going to pump the air off the service brake and the warning light and buzzer should come on at or above 55 psi. This particular vehicle, the warning light and buzzer came on at 60 psi. Next step, we're going to continue to fan off the air pressure and our parking brake should set between 20 and 45 psi. This particular vehicle, the parking brake set at 20 psi. Next, we want to check all the switches on our control panel. We'll start with a two-way radio check. Check and make sure that the radio transmits and receives. Check the wipers on high and low. Make sure the arms are not bent or loose, blades lay flat against the windshield, and they are not weather cracked, torn, or missing. Make sure the windshield washer fluid sprays and cleans the windshield adequately. Check the defrost fans on high and low. Step well heater on high and low. Driver's defroster on high and low. Rear heater on high and low. Boost pump indicator comes on. Heated mirror indicator comes on. Strobe light indicator comes on. Driver's dome comes on. Passenger dome comes on. Warning lamp master switch, turn on the amber warning lights, make sure the indicator comes on, open the door, the red indicator comes on, doors open freely, and the stepwell light comes on. Check the red emergency override, indicator comes on and stop sign comes out. Check the noise suppression switch. Now it's time to do a walkthrough of the bus. We're going to check the seats, check the frames, make sure they're mounted securely to the floor, no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Check the covers, make sure there are no cuts, tears, or vandalism to the covers. Check the emergency hatch, open it up, make sure the warning light and buzzer comes on, and this is a good time to check your strobe light. Make sure it closes securely. Check the side emergency exits, make sure they open freely and the warning light and buzzers come on. Continue to check the rest of the seats as you go back through the bus. At the rear emergency door, open it up, make sure the warning light and buzzer comes on, and check to make sure that your amber warning lights are working. Continue to check seats as you come back through the bus. Next, it's time to check the external lights. Start by checking your clearance lights and tail lights, left turn signal, right turn signal, hazard lights, brake lights, reverse lights and backup beeper, amber warning lights, and red stop lights. Also, we want to check the red override switch to make sure our lights work with it. Then on the front of the bus, we want to check our clearance lights, low beam and high beam headlights, left turn signal, right turn signal, hazard lights, amber warning lights, and red stop lights with the door switch. Crossing gate extends, stop sign extends. Lastly, check the emergency override switch to make sure your lights work with it. Now it's time for the post-trip inspection. When you return to storage, make sure to set your parking brake, place the bus in neutral, turn off all switches. The diesel engine should have a 3 to 5 minute cool down period before turning off the motor, and do a walkthrough. Make sure to check each and every seat position for sleeping students or students that may not have gotten off the bus. Check the seats for damage, cuts, tears, vandalism, any left behind student belongings. At the end of the bus, if you have a no child left behind alarm, reset the alarm by lifting the door handle or pushing the button on the side of the wall. As you return to the front of the bus, make sure to continue to check each and every seat position for students still on the bus. Make sure to complete all reports after the route.
Okay, I'm going to do a CDL brake check like you would do if you was about to take your CDL test. First, I'm going to do a safe start. Make sure my parking brake's set, my bus is in neutral, foot on the service brake, turn my key on, let my gauges cycle, ABS light comes on and goes off. Okay, my bus is already built to the government cutoff of 120 pounds, so I need to show that my air gauge and my government cutoff works. So I want to pump it down to approximately 90 psi, so my governor will kick in. Okay, step one, my air gauge is working and it should be building to the government cutoff of 120 to 140 psi. And I want to listen for the governor to kick out when it builds to maximum pressure. This vehicle, the governor kicked out at 120 psi. Step two, I want to shut the bus off, turn my key back onto the power position, release my parking brake. I'm going to apply pressure to the service brake and hold it for 60 seconds, and I should lose no more than 3 psi after the initial drop. Will you time me, please? For this step, we want to make sure that we ask the examiner to time us, because for the CDL test, we have to sit there the full 60 seconds now. Train your drivers to get used to that 60 seconds, because when you're doing your test, 60 seconds will seem like an hour to them. Okay, I had no more than 3 psi or loss in 60 seconds after the initial drop. Now for my next step, I want to fan the air pressure off, and my warning light and buzzer should come on at or above 55 psi. For this particular vehicle, the low air warning light and buzzer came on at approximately 75 psi. So you want to tell them that you know when it should come on at or above 55 psi, and for your particular vehicle you want to show them where the warning light and buzzer does come on. For my last step, I want to explain to them that I'm going to pump it down, and my parking brake should set between 20 and 45 psi, and then I want to explain where it actually pops at for my particular vehicle. This particular vehicle, the parking brake set at approximately 33 psi.